Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about Total War Warhammer 3. I am in the old world. It is turn 28 of this campaign on Legendary, unmodded, literally using no mod except the old world itself and Toggle Fog of War for the presentation of this particular video. And that is effectively it. Legendary campaign, unmodded, turn 28. I have taken Albion, defeated Bellicor, Nakai, Jan Bo, Manfred, Marcus Wolfhard, and made Grimgor my puppet. Oh yes, this is that kind of campaign. Malus Darkblade is an incredibly powerful Legendary Lord. He's not necessarily my favorite. I do have preferences. I'm a Morathi player if I'm going with the Dark Elves, personally. Or a Lokir player. But certainly, Malus Darkblade has a great deal of power. And what I want to talk about in this particular video is to understand what makes a particular race, a particular faction, a particular legendary lord very powerful, and what doesn't. That's what I want to examine in this particular video, because the Dark Elves are one of the most powerful races in the game. Despite many people criticizing them, they absolutely are, and have been since day one. And then you have Malus Darkblade. So I do want to examine that aspect. It's something I've talked about in the past, just going to explore it a bit further in this video. So first off, let's talk about a race. What makes a race good? What makes a race bad? First thing we have to start with is, yes, the climate. Because climate suitability is very important. Now, Malus Darkblade is not in a position in Albion because Albion is a mess. It's meant to be a mess. Now, Malus Darkblade doesn't have a starting position where he can take advantage of it, but he certainly has a great deal of climate suitability. He can take Frozen, he can take Mountains, he can take Chaotic Wasteland, he can take Temperate Island, so Wolf 1, Jungle. And he has Savannah and Temperate as unpleasant, but not unsuitable. What this means is that vast portions of the campaign map, he can colonize, he can take over without too many issues. And in particular in Immortal Empires, being able to take over the Chaos Wastes is a significant deal, because while the Chaos Wastes are not the most interesting area of the campaign map to play on, they are certainly very well protected. It's hard to traverse them, and if you build a massive economy there, it's going to be difficult for anyone to kick you out. And if you're playing against a faction that has established a dominant position in Chaos Wasteland, it is going to take a significant effort to kick them out. So Malus Darkblade and the Dark Elves in general, because of their climate suitability, because usually they have good climate suitability, are going to be in a better situation simply because of the climate itself. Though of course you can use mods to remove the climate penalties, which I would highly recommend for something like the Old World mod, because dealing with a bunch of unpleasant climate for large portions of the territory is not exactly great. Old World is a mod. It's designed to be played with mods, I believe. It's certainly designed with certain big mods in mind. I'm fairly certain about that. So that's one of the first things. The second thing, economy. The Dark Elves have a really powerful economy. The reason behind that is that their base economic structure can generate up to 700 income. The caveat is that you have to spend slaves on it, but that's no problem. You generate 700 income per structure, per settlement. You can generate 3,400, 2,000 over here, and I'm certainly not done building over here, and more and more and more. You're looking at a province generating, even an unpleasant climate, generating a ridiculous amount of gold once you have properly built it up. It is pretty absurd, it is pretty powerful, and while people have made a big deal about the slaves, the reality is you gain a significant, you will not run out of slaves so easily. It would take really over 2 turns to run out of slaves here, and that's assuming I'm going 2 turns without fighting any battle. And even if I run out of slaves while my economy slows down, it won't stop completely. So it's turn 28, an Old World campaign, which is slower paced than Immortal Empires, and I'm generating over 11,000 over here. And this is not the best campaign example of that, because I've certainly had to make certain sacrifices for various structures, but once I build everything up, I'll quickly rise up to 20,000. So economic potential is a big deal. You have money, you spend money, you build structures, you build settlements. Another thing that's really important is growth. Dark Elves have good growth. Now, Malice Darkblade is on a different level of growth compared to everyone else, because he can get up to 100 growth with full control of the demon. But the baseline Dark Elf growth is really strong, specifically because of Slave Drive. Because you can spend 300 slaves and get 50 growth for 5 turns. That's significant. Furthermore, with the slaves, you can also get instant construction. That is a remake that Dark Elves got, because a lot of people were unhappy with their state before, is the remake they got once the Chaos Dwarves were introduced in the game. So instant construction, high levels of growth, huge amount of money. Furthermore, the Dark Elves earn a ridiculous sum of money from post-battle loot and sacking settlements. So for instance, here I got an event, 10% income from sacking settlements. There is a right that I did use earlier on in this campaign that gives me 50% more income from post-battle loot and casualties, which are slaves. So you can sack settlements, occupy settlements. The playstyle of the Dark Elves, you go up to a settlement, you sack it, you get slaves, you get money, you occupy it, you rebuild it very quickly, you get a very powerful economy. And also you can trade. While I don't have any trading partners right now because I can only see Lokir, it is certainly very viable to trade. They don't have the best trading ability, but they certainly can trade and get significant benefits from it with respect to that, if you do get the trade resources. They aren't the best because they don't generate those trade resources themselves, but once you get it going, you get going. So there's a significant amount of money that you can generate as the Dark Elves. And any faction that has a good amount of trade or good amount of money that can get in either from their settlement buildings or for post-battle loot, ideally both. This is what makes Dark Elves strong, what makes Greenskin strong. They generate both a lot of money from settlements and they generate a lot of money post-battle. Furthermore, Dark Elves get even crazier. Like in this campaign, I have 3 entire armies that are effectively made up of tier 2. Some tier 1 units, mainly tier 2, tier 3 units. These are expensive armies. Like Malice's army is like 3k. It's really around 3-4k that you're going to work with in a campaign. It will obviously rise as you get more and more armies. But while the cost of these armies on land is significant, the real benefit is that the Dark Elves have Black Arks. And the Black Arks reduce the upkeep of units stationed in them by minus 55%. So not only do they get a lot of money, not only do they grow very quickly, but on top of that, they can have their mobile fleets with full stacks in them. And these fleets can attack settlements. Like over here, I'm about to fight Rapance. Rapance decided she was feeling particularly suicidal today and declared war on Malice Darkblade, who in this case I'm allied with Grimgor. That's just suicide by Grimgor and Malice Darkblade. Insanity. I mean, look at the situation. She's got the entire stack here. Maybe she has a second army. Maybe I won't be able to occupy the settlement this turn. But I certainly can defeat this army and the very powerful garrison that she has here with this force, because this is a fairly substantial force with powerful units. And even if I can't, it's like just a couple of turns until Malice Darkblade arrives, and that will be it. So you get cheap armies, and you get powerful armies at that through the Black Arks. You do lack, there's some trade-offs, and typically there will be trade-offs with certain races. Depend on which race you have. Greenskins can't trade, for instance. Warriors of Chaos can't occupy as many settlements. Chaos Dwarves don't necessarily have as much raw cash on hand because they have to worry about materials and armaments in their campaign. There are typically some trade-offs, but what makes the powerful races powerful is being able to maintain either a very large number of units and a huge amount of armies, or having really powerful individual armies. Warriors of Chaos focus more on having powerful individual armies. Dark Elves focus on having cheap armies of pretty good units, at least early on in a campaign. And to be clear, a Dark Elf army can take on a Warriors of Chaos army, or at least a generic one. Power in a campaign does not come from having one legendary lord with their army being really powerful. Sure, this army right here, Malice Darkblade alone, could probably defeat any other army in the game, especially if I go for full possession. But that's not what's important. That's not the strength over here. The strength is that I have this army and this army. That in 28 turns, despite the cost, despite the climate that I'm dealing with, I am maintaining 3 armies. And I could go even further. I could start getting more units in this particular force. In this particular Black Ark, have 4 armies. And the great thing about Black Arks is you can recruit a lord on them, send that lord on land if you do decide to not have, if you do decide to conquer territory on land. You will lose the upkeep benefit that you have in the Black Ark, but you can certainly do so. So the potential over here is incredible from an economic perspective. So economy, climate, that's what matters for a race. Then there's the units. What kind of units are important? What kind of units don't work? Well, for the Dark Elves in particular, it's a mix of powerful ranged units and powerful melee infantry. So any Dark Elf Legendary Lord can, at one point or another, but fairly early game, like at most 5-6 turns in a campaign, but you will be able to get Black Ark Corsairs in huge numbers. And Black Ark Corsairs, while they're certainly not the best melee units, they do have bonuses against infantry. They have a huge amount of armor. They have a good amount of leadership. So these units will be able to take on a lot of the early game units pretty effectively and win. And that's what makes them dangerous. That is the level of power the Dark Elves do have available, which is their infantry, for the Black Ark Corsairs. And keep in mind, you can recruit, and Black Arks do give you the benefit of upkeep, and also allow you to recruit Black Ark Corsairs, which otherwise would be a tier 3 unit. But it doesn't even matter then, because you can get tier 3 relatively quickly in a campaign. Solid line holders too, and so this is the main melee power of your army, and that is something important. You also have solid line holders and the Dread Spears, and then powerful range units. While Dark Shards with shields lack the range of something like High Elf Archers, they still have a Silver Shield, which protects them from enemy range power, and a good amount of damage, which is armor piercing, and to multiple projectiles. And then you also have artillery, which you can get at tier 3, Reaper bolt throwers. You have a versatile army that can deal with everything else that you face. And that again is one of the things that makes a very powerful race powerful. It's not just having one particular unit type that's incredibly powerful, it's having multiple unit types that you can easily acquire in a campaign that are powerful. Be it infantry, range units, cavalry, line holders, you name it. Furthermore, there is the heroes aspect. Dark Elves don't necessarily have some of the very, very best heroes in the game, but they do have heroes easily accessible, and you can get a lot of them. Each barracks increases your master's capacity by 1. Each Shrine of Cain increases your Death Hag and Cainite Assassin capacity by 1. Each Sorcerer Abode gives you 1 Sorcerer at tier 3. So you end up in a situation like this. Like over here, you can see that I have 4 heroes, one of which I started with. Another 4 heroes over here. So that's a total of 8. And then a final one here. So by turn 29, I have 9 heroes in my campaign. And I can get more. Like if I just get more settlements and I'm willing to invest that, I absolutely can get more. Maybe I just need to get rid of this building. It's kind of pointless. Get another Sorcerer Abode, all that. So hero capacity, having a lot of heroes early on, that's another thing that matters, especially early on. I don't care that certain races can get a lot of heroes at tier 4, because tier 4, that means your hero capacity is going to be limited by provincial capitals. The best races are the ones that can get a lot of heroes at tier 3, because that means you can build those structures in minor settlements and increase your hero capacity for that. The only limitation the Dark Elves, for instance, have is that sorceresses can only increase their capacity through provincial capital. Everyone else, you can do it in minor settlements. So each province can give you 1 hero type of each, at least, or multiple hero capacity. Though, of course, you have to balance your provinces between economy and hero and unit recruitment. But that is what makes them powerful. Army roster, heroes, and then there's lords. Dark Elves also have powerful lords. Again, some of the most powerful races have powerful lords. And it's not just that, for instance, Dread Lords with Sword and Shield have a good amount of power, because they do. They are pretty solid melee combatants, but it's not just that. They can get Black Dragon. Again, not just that. It's the names of power. So for instance, you get the choice to customize your lord and even your heroes with the name of power. In this case, she has an upkeep benefit of minus 30% for dark shards in particular. So all of these guys cost me significantly less in her army to maintain. And of course, it's not just dark shards that affects. It also affects dread spears, and I have those as well, and increases recruit rank. Another thing, the individual power of your generic lords and heroes, they do matter. Again, it's not just about the one powerful army or a powerful hero or anything like that. It's about a dozen powerful armies, a dozen powerful heroes, a dozen powerful lords that makes very strong factions strong. And then there's the faction effects, the lord effects. What makes a lord like Malice Darkblade or Grimgore really powerful in a campaign? Well, both Malice Darkblade and Grimgore are incredible fighters on the battlefield. Malice Darkblade in particular can solo entire armies on his own. He doesn't need an army. You give him full possession, he's going to be unbeatable in a fight. You don't necessarily need to use it. You can certainly go with full control for the benefits on the campaign side of things, but full possession is pretty crazy. That's the first thing. Then you don't necessarily have the best faction effects, but there's certainly some powerful faction effects for powerful legendary lords. It can be something like extra income, campaign movement range, extra income from sacking and looting settlements. It can also, ancillaries can also be pretty useful to add power. Items from quest battles can also add to it. Now, I didn't bother with the Warp Sword of Cain. It isn't necessarily the easiest battle in the world, and I had other fish to fry in this campaign than worrying about that. But that's power. There's also the Lord effects and Lord skill line. So in his case, he's immune to cast corruption and cast waste attrition. And he gets an upkeep benefit for units you don't care about. So yeah, kind of mixed bag in that. But here's the thing. He gets a campaign movement range benefit for his entire army and reduces casualties suffered by attrition. On top of that, he also reduces the upkeep of his units in his army and gains a significant amount of benefits for himself through his special skill line. Yeah, there's reasons why I prefer Morathi. She's got a far more powerful skill line, a far more powerful lord effects, though she does have her own limitations in a campaign. But regardless, an incredible level of power that you can get through this. And this is what matters. This is what makes the strong races, stronger. Because an army like this, a faction like this, you will have an easier time. You will not have to struggle about money from most of your campaign. In fact, you'll be wondering, okay, at one point, you'll get to a stage where it's like you just have nothing to spend it on. Because you do get to a point of, until you get enough territory to support your economy, you have diminishing returns on how many armies you can have. And you don't necessarily want to go bankrupt. So you'll end up stockpiling quite a lot of money if you're careful about as a Dark Elf, in a Dark Elf campaign, just because you don't want to enter an economic deficit. Or you could play very aggressively and just rely on winning a battle every single turn, which you certainly can do. It's that kind of power. And all of this combined is why certain races, from my perspective, are significantly better than others. Because consider not this army, this army. What can stand up against this army in turn 30? A couple of legendary lords, absolutely, though this army would defeat Skarbrand, Taurox, Tyrion, Alariel, but a couple would stand up to it. They'd still lose, I want to point out. The heroes, the range units, the melee units, the experience that they have. Again, unmodded campaign, this one. The experience they have. And the reason with having multiple heroes, it's also replenishment, for instance. It's a post-battle loot from the Canaanite assassins. It's magic and scouting to get more items. It's training from the masters. Very few armies would be able to stand up to it. Something like Vlad, something like Draika. If you take something like Draika or Vlad to stop a generic army and put a real challenge to it, and even then you could still win if you play carefully, then yeah, that's power. This is the thing that certain people don't understand when I talk about power and when I make points about which races are strong and which races are weak, which campaigns are great and which campaigns are bad. You can win the game as any race, any lord, any faction. It doesn't matter. But with a faction like Dark Elves, Warriors, Chaos, Wood Elves, you can annihilate your opponents. And it would take an incredible level of power to slow you down, to slow down your secondary armies, not your main army. Your main army is the strongest army in every campaign. That's the case. But consider this. Consider the options that I have in this campaign by turn 30 and compare that to the fucking ogres or the vampire ghosts or even the tomb kings, who at this point in a tomb king campaign, I would have what? 2 extra armies free at most. And even if I got free, and really I would probably only have 2 total, and while they'd be free, they would be filled with crap spearmen and skeletal warriors who would crumble into the dust compared to this, and let alone hero capacity. That's the critical difference that needs to be understood. This is what makes the powerful races powerful and the weaker races weak. This is why I make a big point about how bad the Vampire Coast is, how bad Kislev is, how bad the Empire is. Because when you see this level of strength, and it's not just Dark Elves, I emphasize, it's Dark Elves, Greenskins, Cast Dwarves. Those are the top 3 races. Warriors of Chaos, Wood Elves. Those are the top 5 races in terms of strength on a campaign map. It's High Elves. It's either having really powerful armies or cheap armies that can maintain a lot of numbers, or ideally both. That's the thing about the Greenskins. They have both. That's the thing about the Dark Elves. They have a lot of armies that are really powerful. They may not have the insane list of regiments of renown that the damned Warriors of Chaos do have, because that's one of their strengths, but they certainly have the power available to them. That's my position on this. Costin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.